Hi, welcome to Knits Up. My name is Mindy. I am otherwise known as Knitter CNY on Ravelry and Instagram. There is a podcast group for the Knits Up podcast over on Ravelry. There is also a Facebook page. I usually have recorded to YouTube a lot lately, but I thought I would do a little bit of a voice update because I know it's starting to be Valentine's Day weekend and you're maybe not going to watch a whole video, but I thought I'd let you know what's going on. I may record this weekend. I might not, depends on what the weather and the lighting is like, what my schedule ends up being. So, I have been working on a few things. So far this year, I've gotten one pair of socks done. I have finished a whole other sock and have started a second sock. This is out of 6 single socks that are partially started. I want to get 6 pairs of socks done because I have all this sock yarn. I have yarn for another 35 pairs of socks, believe it or not, if you can imagine that. So I'm working on that. I've also pulled out some projects that I felt like working on, one of which is the Cityscape Shawl, which is a free pattern from Red Heart. The designer is Benjamin Matthews. And this uses 4 skeins of Red Heart Colorscape yarn. Last summer, when Hobby Lobby was having a really good clearance sale, I got 4 skeins of Colorscape yarn for $1.54 a piece. They're 2 colors, 2 skeins each. It's a shallow, almost like a scarf slash shawl. It's all in garter stitch. You need to know how to do a front knit in the front and the back, and then do a center double decrease. Marley Bird has a video for this to show you how to do a couple of things with this. And the pattern is a little bit difficult when you get started because I'm trying to figure it out because it's not symmetrical. There's more increasing on one side than there is on the other. You could probably make it symmetrical if that made you happier, but you wouldn't get the same shape. So I'm working on the decreasing part now. So I've gotten to the largest point, which is 86 stitches, I think, across. This uses, I think, a size 10 needle. And what I ended up using, I think, was slightly either smaller or larger. I'm using a 5.5 millimeter because that's what I had. So I figured, yeah, I'll use that. That'll work. And it's worked out just fine. So I'm still working off the first 2 balls of yarn. So I may end up with a little bit of leftover yarn, but that's okay. I spent $1.54 for each ball, so it's like a $6 project for me. It's coming out really pretty. It's a color changing yarn, so it kind of looks like it's doing all kinds of fancy striping, and it's totally just the yarn. It looks great in garter stitch. It's a fabulous pattern. I highly recommend it. I have a blanket that I'm crocheting that's all half double crochet. I've barely worked on that at all. I may pull that out and work on that this weekend. I have to take my car in for an oil change and getting the tires rotated. So I'll be at the car dealers for a while. So I think I'm going to take that Afghan because that's relatively easy to work on. I did do some stash acquisition. I wound up buying yarn at Ollie's discount store. We have one that's about 5 or 6 miles away from me. And I knew that they had Lion Brand Thick and Quick. The colors are like bird colors, But basically they're all a gray base and then they have a splash of color in them. One of them is like yellow, one's like a bright orange. There's a turquoise color, there's a purple color, there's a darker gray color, almost black, and then there's a white color, and they all have names of birds. So I think I bought maybe one skein of that, but when I was in Ollie's the other day, they had a box of Bernat pop yarn, which is sort of like the Caron cakes, only Bernat pop is 100% acrylic. And so I got 6 balls of that. I got 6 balls of it because I wanted to make a blanket. There's a blanket that actually calls for that yarn. It calls for 6 cakes of it. And it's called the All for One Comfort Blanket. And it's a free pattern that's on the Yarnspirations website. I've used that pattern before with Caron cakes, just 2 of them to make like a little lap gown for the nursing home where my dad is. I made a few of those because it's a rectangular granny, so it will come out looking like a granny square, only it's a granny rectangle. And you can either wear it as like a shawl around your shoulders, or you can use it like a little blanket across you, but it's not so heavy that it's gonna, interfere with anything. So I made a few of those that they use at the nursing home. So it worked out really well. Now I have a couple other skeins of the Caron cakes that I can make. And then I have some Hobby Lobby sugar wheel yarn that I have a couple of skeins of in different colors that I also bought on clearance, I think for $1.75 a skein or something like that. So really inexpensive color changing yarn that's 100% acrylic. The sugar wheel colors that I got are very strange combinations though. One of the ones that I'm making now is called Snow Cone Machine, and it has like a bright blue, a purple, then it goes to like sort of an orange color, and then it has like a brown color in it. I don't know how to explain it. You'd have to see it to believe it. And then I think there's a fluorescent green in it too. I mean, they're all like the sort of colors if you were making snow cones that you would put on it. So, like a bright blue snow cone, a purple, bright blue grape, a grape snow cone, that sort of thing. But they're just really weird together, but somehow it works because I think they're all the same value, I think is the right word for it. So I have 2 skeins of that I'm working on the blanket for. So the socks are the main thing. And that's about all I am working on right now. I have projects that I'm trying to start. I tried to start the game day make-along with Marley Bird that was around the time of the Super Bowl. It was going to be a all-day project, like 10 or 12 clues. I started the crochet one, which was a pattern by Robin Chichula. I think that wound up being a shrug, basically. And after the first clue, I was like, this is great for other people. This is not going to be great for me. I don't like the look of it. But that's just me. I mean, it was a pretty simple pattern to follow. So I decided that I wanted to start the knit pattern. So I pulled out a couple of skeins of yarn and I did the ribbing, which was the first clue. And then I did the Latvian braid, which thankfully Marley Bird had done a video for. It was super clear. I got through that. Then I got into sort of a striping section, and I'm only using 2 colors. I decided that I was going to use a solid blue in navy, and the yarn is Peyton's Classic wool worsted, and it's a true navy. And then I had a skein of this, I think it's Rossetti Yarns Windsong or some odd thing. It's like a purplish cornflower blue variegated yarn, and it's thick and thin in some places, but not too thick and thin. It's not too much difference, and I have a whole ball of that, like 220 yards, and it is good against a solid background. So what I figured out was Marley's pattern had you cast on a certain amount. So I'm going through I'm just striping now. I did like 5 stripes of the dark navy against 3 stripes of the variegated. So now I've ended up, and they were like 2 rounds apiece because it's circular cowl. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wind up decreasing 2 stitches, and there is a pattern on Yarnspirations for cowl that has like a Norwegian flower star thing in the middle. So I'm going to use that motif and figured out how many stitches across it is, figured out, okay, what's the nearest even multiple of that is near the stitch count that I have for this cowl that I'm already working on. So I'm going to, I end up decreasing 2 stitches. I'll do all of the Norwegian star part in the variegated yarn, so it'll look like it's very, very complicated, but all it is just a variegated yarn. So it should look really cute. And then I'll repeat the striping section at the top, 3 variegated and 5 solid. And then I'll do another Latvian braid, and then I'll do more ribbing. So I'll probably have to increase, I'll probably do a different ribbing at the top. We did 1x1 ribbing at the bottom, and 1x1 ribbing kind of makes me have a facial tic after a while because my wrists really do not like 1x1 ribbing. Even though 2x2 ribbing is the same amount of stitches, it's the same amount of knit stitches and the same amount of purl stitches. My wrists like that better because it's 2 things in a row versus having to switch on and off and on and off and on and off, like you were flipping a light switch. My hands and wrists don't really like that too much. So I'll end up doing 2x2 ribbing, which is fine because it'll cinch in a little bit at the top. But it really doesn't matter because it'll be a reversible type pattern. But I don't know who I am making this thing for. Obviously, somebody who knows that you can't throw wool in a washing machine and a dryer and felt it. So it'll have to be somebody who knows that in my family or a friend. So those are what I'm working on. I am trying to work through stash this year. It just seems like no matter where I turn, every podcast that I watch is like, oh yeah, let's stash down. And everybody's like trying in vain to use up their stash. I did get rid of some of my stash. Over the summer, it's kind of funny. I'm usually 6 months ahead of the trend with things. So part of the stash down challenge that I saw immediately in January was, here, document your stash and document what patterns you want to use with what you've got left. Well, I decided over the summer that I hadn't updated my Ravelry stash pictures in like 5 years or something like that, because I was one of the first few thousand people that was on Ravelry. When it was formed, it was by invitation only. So I got on the invitation list, and I've been on there for years and years. So I decided I needed to document everything. And so I pulled up pictures, and then I was like, okay, everybody on Instagram, you're going to see everything in my stash. I may or may not describe it all, but I'm mostly uploading it so you see the pictures. And then I'm going to upload the pictures to Ravelry because it was just easier to do it that way, because the pulling pictures off of Instagram into your Ravelry stash pictures is super easy. So that's what I did. So I had, like days and days of just, here, take out a yarn, click. Here, take out a yarn, click. Oh, look, more yarn. Oh, look, more sock yarn. So I have all this yarn. So that's all living in my study, in various bins, shrink wrap bags, like vacuum bags, and then some like shelf lined bags, like some under bed tote kind of things that I bought on sale at Walmart over the winter, or the summer, I should say. So all of that is living in my study, and like I said, there's yarn for 35 pairs of socks. There's yarn for like 2 or 3 different kinds of shawls. And in that process, before that, earlier in the spring, I had pulled out like 2 garbage bags full of yarn that I was like, I'm never going to use this. And somebody who was a former member of a knitting guild, I'm a former member of a knitting guild, and she was in the knitting guild when I was in it. And she messaged me on Facebook. I was like, I would love to give this to somebody I know. I'll deliver it. And she was like, come on over. So I dropped off a couple bags full of yarn, because she's a crocheter and a knitter, I believe. And so that worked out very well. But I still have a lot of yarn. So at Christmas time, we all got together, my mom's side of the family. My mom's deceased, but, my cousins and my aunt and everybody still gets together with their kids and stuff. And we got together and did a gift exchange. And I had bought a set of crochet hooks from Athena's Elements on Amazon. They were pretty cheap. I think they were like $12 or $13. And they're ergonomic. They had nice handles for them. But they were just not the right ones for me. I either prefer a little shorter or something that's more tapered at the end. So I had this extra, I had this whole set of really nice ergonomic crochet hooks, but that hadn't cost me a whole lot of money. So I brought that and said, does anybody in the family want these? Because we have people that crochet, we have people that knit. And my cousin, who's a nurse up north, said, yeah, I'll take those. So she took them home. I don't know if she's used them yet, but I do know that she crocheted or knit something that is, I think she crocheted it, like a dishcloth doily sort of thing out of cotton. And it was round. It looks really cute. And so kiddingly, I said, oh, do you need any cotton yarn? And she was like, sure. So I messaged her through Messenger and said, well, I might have some for you. So I posted a box today that has a whole bunch of cotton and cotton blend yarns in it, including Vicky Howell Cottonish, which was a Bernat yarn that came out about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe more than that. That's a cotton acrylic blend, and it's like a number 3 weight, but it's thin. It's very thin, but it's not, it'd be great for crochet, and there's enough there. There's probably 7 balls of it, so there's got to be 800 or 900 yards of this stuff. And then last summer, when the cotton cakes type yarn had come out that AC Moore carried, that almost looks like a hobium yarn, that was 100% cotton. It had the easy start tab, but they were 1,000 yards or 1,100 yards, and it's like, I think it goes from white to like a tealy blue to a purple. And I was like, what was I thinking? It's a number 2 weight. like, or maybe even a number one weight. I'm like, I'm never going to use this. I've like 1,000 yards of this. I'm never going to use this. So I put that in there. I put some dishcloth cotton in there. Try to think. And then I had a couple skeins left over of Peyton's Grace. That's 100% mercerized cotton. There must have been something else that I put in there. There were a few other things, but I put like solid colors of the dishcloth cotton because that seemed like a good idea. So she's going to get this. It filled a medium size postage, priority postage box. So you know how big that is. So it's like 4-gallon bags almost of stuff in there. So I was like, at least this will keep her for a while, and I'll have, gotten some of this stuff out of my stash that I'm never going to use, and it will live a useful life somewhere else. So I highly recommend doing that. And then I also have a friend in town that she knits and crochets as well, and sometimes when she's needing yarn that's not in her stash, she'll ask me for yarn because I usually have it. But now we're getting to the point where I'm like, okay, I have yarn. Last winter, you'll probably remember, she and I went to a yarn auction last February, and it was a gentleman who had run a yarn shop and a flower shop out east of us had passed away, and they auctioned his stuff. How they ended up at this auction house, I have no idea. But he had furniture, he had farming implements, he had paintings, all kinds of stuff. I mean, just chock full of stuff. And yarn was a big part of it because he had run the yarn store and this was leftovers. So I had patterns, I had all kinds of crazy stuff, just nuts. So I offloaded the patterns, not really offloaded, but I go to a knitting group occasionally. It had been a few years since I'd been to this one, so I asked if I could bring the 2 boxes with me, and then one of the ladies and her mom took them home, and they said, we're going to take what we want, and then we'll make sure that we bring them back and sort of distribute them, a little bit at a time so everybody's not totally overwhelmed. I was like, whatever you want to do, you just do. So a lot of the patterns came from that. I pulled out what patterns I wanted. All my knitting books and patterns now live on 2 shelves in my dining room because I have custom built bookcases that my dad built when I was a kid. One is currently holding glassware that was my mother's, including Fenton art glass. The other one holds odds and ends of books and buttons and all sorts of things, but 2 of the shelves have my knitting books and magazines and patterns on them now. Because a lot of my patterns now, of course, are on Ravelry that I keep a collection of. And nobody needs knitting magazines from like 5-10 years ago that, I'm not that size. I'm not going to knit that. The children are all in college that I know, except my goddaughter who's in elementary school, and I've made her sweaters ever since she was a baby. And now she has a sweater for the size she's growing into now, and then she has a sweater that will be a junior high sweater, basically. And she's like in 3rd grade. So her mom was kidding with me. Her mom could almost wear it. So it was kind of one of those of, oops, that's too big. I gotta knit a smaller size. So she has like the sweater she's growing into, and then she has the next sweater. So I'm set for a while, until like she gets in high school or something. So that works out really well. So that's what I'm working on. I keep talking here, and I don't want to belabor the point because it's getting to be kind of a long episode. I was just wondering if you're on this stash down kick like all of the podcasts are. And if you are, can you post in the group what you're stashing down? If you want to flash your stash, feel free. If you don't want to, I completely understand. I've already sort of done that over the summer, like I said, with all the Instagram photos. But it's interesting to see how my tastes have changed and to see what projects I still have left and maybe what I want to do and maybe what I don't want to do, and realizing that all of this yard I have, it's like I keep kidding that I'm stockpiling against inflation. Well, I was against Chinese tariffs on acrylic